Okay, thank you, dear Gianvito, for being today with us. It's great pleasure for us. We understand that you have very busy schedule, and we are most grateful that you can arrange some time and join our program. It's a privilege for us, and we know that you are in the middle of the Corona crisis. I mean, you live in Bergamo, you work in Milano, and you are in the middle of the crisis, being the scientific director of the big hospital. So, and when I introduced you, I mentioned that you are both a scientist and clinician, and that makes you kind of placed in unique position. And of course, I can't avoid asking you your perspective or what's happening now in the hotspot of Europe and hotspot you are in the epicenter. And I think it will be very valuable to hear your opinion of ongoing crisis as a scientist, as a clinician, and what is the current situation and how we should develop in the future our daily activity or future scientific or clinician work in order to make most out of this crisis.
Thank you very much, Zaza. Thank you very much, David. It's a real pleasure and an honor to be here, so thank you very much for your kind invitation. You said the right word. It's a crisis, dear Dada, because we have been involved in something we never expected to occur. This is a real pandemic. I didn't know what was a pandemic before, believe me, but I understood very quickly what does it mean, because the main problem we had is very simple, because we were not prepared to admit so many patients that required intensive care support at the same time. Just to give you an example, at the peak of the crisis, we had more or less 4,000 patients who required ICU, and 40% of those patients were in Lombardy and in the region you were referring to, close to Bergamo, Milano, Brescia. And unfortunately, at that time, we had only 700 ICU beds. So this makes you aware of the fact that we were not ready. The system was not ready. Patients were too many at the same time. They required intensive care units, so at that time, we had to have specialists of intensive care, which is not easy.
Very few, yeah.
Very few. And as you know, better than me, not only physicians, of course, but also nurses, able to deal with those patients. And unfortunately, the quantity and the fact we were not prepared, at least to some extent, was the real problem we had to face with. Nowadays, fortunately, the pandemic is fading out, or at least this is what we think according to numbers. And actually, we are seeing less patients admitted to ICU. So now in the entire Italy, there should be around 700 patients. So numbers are really very, very low compared to previous numbers.
Yeah,
because
it was huge.
Still, we have people that need to be cured. And this is exactly what happens. Of course, as you could imagine by numbers, if you have seen the numbers in big cities, in the metropolitan areas, the virus did spread so easily and so rapidly that, New York, London, Paris, Milan, and of course, places in which there are a lot of people going back and forth and a lot of people staying together. That was the reason why.
It was unavoidable, yeah.
Exactly. What we have learned, we have learned that we need to be prepared for a pandemic from a structural, I would say, point of view. This does not mean only to have hospital like mine ready to support this kind of crisis, but
so it should be more general readiness for this type of.
Exactly. In particular, general practitioners, which have been crucial, because of course the patient at the beginning, they have mild symptoms, they go to the general practitioner to ask advice, and those kind of colleagues were not prepared to provide the advice patients were requiring. And unfortunately, the other problem was that from mild symptoms to get hard symptoms, the time elapsed was very, very short. So in very few hours or days, from just tiredness, for example, those patients got into a sort of respiratory crisis, which was very difficult to deal with.
Yeah, but Gianvito, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, how much the lack of the knowledge about this contributed? I mean, I'm trying to tilt towards the science and basic knowledge, which unfortunately there was very little available. And
Yes.
in the process of fighting, I mean, there was a research ongoing and clinical and the basic. I mean, we were learning as fighting it. And I think that created also the very bad situation, which resulted in such numbers.
No, that's another crucial point, of course, because as you know, what we did at the beginning is just to use antiviral drugs which were available at that time, remdesivir, anti-HIV drugs, and those kind of things. Or maybe some, empirical treatment like chloroquine or these kind of things, but nothing specific. And of course, those drugs showed to be very, very little effective.
And controversial in many cases.
Controversial, exactly, in many cases. But still, we provided to patient this kind of support. While in the coming days, we understood that the pathology was a little bit different than the previous coronavirus infections, because it was not only respiratory, but unfortunately, and this is something came out later in the literature, the virus is able to infect everything: heart, kidney, brain, not only lungs. And we understood very, very, very rapidly, I must admit, that in particular there was microhemorrhages in different organs, there were clot of blood, and therefore at that time we understood that there was an hyperinflammatory reaction due to the viral infection, which is not strange because it occurs in many other infections, but we understood that was the part of the story we could try to deal with. And in fact, we started to use several monoclonal antibodies which are against pro-inflammatory cytokines, and in order to dampen down this hyperinflammatory response. And actually, although we did it in few patient, data are quite interesting, because at least we can provide something to our patient for making them suffering less.
At least we have something. David, you have a question, I guess.
No, I just wanted to ask you, Gianluigi, I know that you were involved also in data analysis. It's still ongoing process, I understood it, right? Do you have any preliminary results of analysis?
No, we can tell you that we have been publishing many papers in this couple of months, and but regarding your question, which is crucial, we made the first analysis on 500 patients, which were the first patient we admitted. Just to give you an idea, in our group, which is composed by 21 hospitals, of course San Rafael is the biggest one, but actually we are a group, we have been more than 5,000 patients admitted with COVID-19, so it was quite heavy, the workload that we had to confront with, unfortunately. But anyhow, on the other end, as you said, we have been able to collect data and to understand a little bit more about this pathology. And in particular, what we understood is that if you are over 65, if you have hypertension, if you have coronary diseases, if you have cancer, if you have diabetes, you risk to get from the mild form to the hardest one. And also we found interesting things, because we have been helped to make this kind of distinction between patients progressively rapidly by using also blood data, because we found that, for example, there was ferritin and dimer, which are two protein you can easily measure in the blood routinely. And also if you have less white blood cells, those are things that, if you put together, make you aware of the risk that the patient is going to confront with. And therefore, in this patient in which there were indications that this kind of symptoms and signs were going on, we tried to again, as I told you before, to use this kind of drugs, even not specific, but in order to avoid this hyperimmune reaction. And
I think Corona was an excellent case demonstrating the importance of the research and the science, especially when it comes to the biomedical science. Because I can predict that if we would have known more basics about this virus or its action mode, etc., I mean, we could have been much more successful in fighting it. And I think that brings us towards the more research side of this crisis and the science. And you, as a wonderful scientist, neuroimmunologist, and the clinician, I think I would like to discuss a little bit on the scientific part of the crisis. I mean, like this, because what we have seen that science is essential, but on the other hand, due to the time pressure and due to the crisis, sometimes the quality and the publications or studies which we see, they are suffering. And the question is how to, on the other hand, we need this data, because when you don't have anything, I mean, any data are valuable and important. So I would like to hear your opinion. I mean, how can we keep this balance? On one hand, the lack of the knowledge, on the other hand, the significance and the validity of the data which are generated under this crisis situation.
But again, you hit a very, very crucial point, because unfortunately, due to the pressure of the lay people, and which was reasonable, and due to the fact that scientists have been involved from the beginning, people were thinking that we could solve everything in few days or few hours. And this brings me to a point, which is the scarce knowledge of lay people regarding science, because we need our time. We know very well that there are a lot of data in the English American literature which simply are not true or not reproducible. This is something which is really contaminating our work every day. And in this kind of situation, which was really crucial, we have been seeing flourishing 100,000 papers which were reporting data that could not be controlled in any way. And therefore, and I must admit that unfortunately, even big journals were not so critic, let's put it this way, in publishing data, because probably they were also under pressure and that they should show up that they were producing something. But this brings me to the crucial point that you've been alluding to, and this is the crisis of science, the crisis of people looking at science as a part of our culture. Unfortunately, this is not yet the case. People doesn't know anything about science, and therefore when they have to confront with science, they think that we are lazy people, not doing things properly, or just waiting for something.
Gian Vito, when we started talk, we were talking about you, and also as for me, which is very high level of science, is science education. I'm from the generation who understands that philosophy of science, history of science, and science itself. So we are in the situation at the moment that science was underestimated, let's say, underrepresented even. Now it's overrepresented, and you say there is a quality and self-proclaimed experts in Georgia is full also.
Everyone is expert nowadays.
Yeah, but now it's let's say there are two now direction in post-corona time. One is research, I understand, and then its implication in industry. But second, which you were doing, I think I was really very impressed when I saw first time Bergamo Science Festival, exactly talking with people through different platforms. And my question really, and everybody is interested, how this platform could be now useful. For my guess, and for Zaza, I imagine this is crucial. But how it to be, how to be now, find this balance when it's a big interest, big anticipation, but same time, not very much about, we can say not much about culture of science. How you can see it really? Of course, there is not one clue, but.
The point is again well taken, David, because you said the right word, education. I've been struggling a lot. It's about 20 years that I'm trying, of course, with a lot of friends, to try to make science resurrecting to some extent. But just to give you the situation in Italy, in primary school and secondary school, I mean, science is neglected. You have a couple of hours per week in which they tell you about science, but they mix everything together: biology, physics, geology, everything at the same time, without a very, precise planning of how to teach science to young students. And therefore, I don't think that we can have any magic bullet to use in order to change the scenario. In my view, the only way is to try and to start educating people from the very, very beginning. I would say even before primary school, and making them aware that science is something that should be part of our own culture, like Latin, Greek, mathematics, or whatever, literature and everything, but should be considered at the same time. And because unfortunately people do not consider, at least in my view, that whatever they do, even in this moment, we are using what were the product of science. We are using Zoom, or we are using T-code just because there was someone developing this in the past. So we are using a lot of product of science without knowing that there is a lot of science in what we do every day.
But the question is exactly how, and maybe this is a question. The main goal of our show is really transmitting knowledge, right, from different point. And National Geographic was always pioneer, and Georgian National Geographic tries it. But how to find really this balance between
fine tuning?
It's between a real hard science, peer review, and from other hand, to be way of communicating to public. And I think what you are doing through a science festival, I would say this is crucial, but not enough, let's say. Maybe we need science festivals daily, not just once in a year, to do it. At the moment, what I want to say. But how you can see the future of festivals even, because I remember when we were with Zaza, there were a lot of activities, many people were going. I have been in other festivals in other countries, and it was really. But now in this post-corona time, what will change there? What do you think?
That's another good point. So the point is the following, and this is what maybe we can ask Angelo later on how we are organizing this year to change a little bit the format. But for sure, we have to go web much more than before. We were used, as you know, to accommodate people in theaters and frontal lectures, I mean, the classical ones. But I must say that even before the COVID-19 story, we were starting to see people who are not so keen to come and sit and wait for 2 hours and listen to talks. I mean, they were a little bit tired of this format, let's put it in this way. So for me, COVID-19 is a very good opportunity to move into the virtual, let's say, way of communicating science, which is much more efficacious because it can reach millions of people rather than hundreds. The point is, unfortunately, that on web you find everything, and you should have someone filtering the right compared to the bad. And scientists are the only one who can make this filtering situation. And so we will be I'm talking about us, which are a little bit not still young as Angelo, but what we have to do, and as organizer of Science Festival, is to provide the best science possible to people by filtering what is going to be presented according to our experience. So we cannot tell them which should be the best format possible, but we can tell them that, for example, they should not choose speakers just because they publish a book which is popular in the bookstores.
So we should keep quality control. Be our experienced scientists function.
Unfortunately, let me say another thing, if I may, that unfortunately scientific journals are not helping us at all. because they are to some extent following a politics which is a little bit strange. You know, they are trying to measure us using this altimetric story, which is based on how many times our papers goes on social strike, very strange thing. So I think that unfortunately the commercial part of the story, because don't forget that publishing groups are commercial entities, and I've been calculating that a few years ago, the yearly turnaround for publishing was around 25 billion euros or dollars in the world. So there is a huge commercial pressure. And don't forget that we are the only category that we have to pay for what we produce as our product of our work, because we give to journals not only the IP or the copyright, but also
we sell to them our product and pay for it.
But on one hand, you see, it's a point that, for example, we are three here, right? We are contacting each other anyway, right? And to create network of scientists, it's normal now to create consortiums. But why not think on the trying to networking auditorium, that Georgian auditorium understands Italian, French understands, because it was, for me as a museum director, this is future. You know, museums' future today, at least, will be active in public education, in right platform, right way, and enlarging your visitors. And all our project with regional museums or international, we will try go this way. Why not thinking scientists, not just talking among each other, which is, we are very clever and we are trying to on our workshops and conferences, but how to find really trick that young Italian and young Georgians will try to understand this importance, and these new European projects will be not just for doing research, but also to be prepared to understand it.
To promote knowledge.
Like, you know, preparing customers or listeners for classical music. How you can see it, excuse me, asking it directly, but we are very much interested in this way.
But I think that, of course, I agree 100% with you, David. I think that one thing that helped us in the past, Zaza and you, we are all involved in this ERC story in Europe, which is, as you know, the most prestigious grant to be awarded to young or not young people making good research. And fortunately enough, in this money that Europe gives to you, you are obliged to do outreach and science communication. And you have to consider this within your program and your project, and partly, of course, the judgment is also based on this opportunity that you share or that you would like to share with lay people. So this is one way to foster outreach and science communication.
But unfortunately, we should admit that quite often it's quite formal, and
Yes,
we are not taking it seriously.
Yes,
Maybe we should reconsider and put more emphasis and more responsibility as a scientist in this part.
Because we like pontificating, right? This is no. Let's say you see this is science, disease of scientists. So the question is how really to find this contact.
No,
to find this contact, you know.
This was the second point I'd like to do. So to some extent, I'm saying politics, quote unquote, could help us to by obliging people to consider outreach into their project. And this is one way to go, because this also train young people to talk publicly about the science they do. But the second point, which was the one you were alluding to, was to make connection. And now I think that connection can be made much more easier than before, and the COVID crisis is the excuse to do it in a much faster way.
And larger way.
In a larger way. And this is the reason I was telling before that could be an occasion. Which is the problem here? That while the use of social is very common in young people, is not common yet, at least in Italy, in older people. So the problem is that in this way you can divide your audience, or you can create two different channels for young and old. While I think that all
custom made. custom made.
While I think that all generations should talk together, because of course also experience is very important, not only geniality, but also experience, practical experience. A scientist which have, I don't know, 30 years of work like ourselves, saying, don't go in that direction because we tried already, but it didn't work.
It's dead end.
Exactly. So I think that by connecting people together through, of course, web-based system, and I'm sure that Angelo will tell you a little bit more of how we are trying to exactly reach what you have been suggesting in the format we are to some extent setting up for Bergamo Scienza. And let me conclude by saying that, of course, I told you already that I will be more than happy to start joining, for example, our science festival together through the common web platform in which we can create a continuous education in science, not only a few days during the year in which
Yes,
you
I agree.
concentrate the festival.
More regular basis.
Exactly,
yeah.
on a regular basis, because this is the point. Of course, I tried to do this 10 years ago with Science Festival in Italy, and I failed because everyone owns, we say, to have their little space in which they can think to be the most powerful people in the world. So if people who try to see science as an altruistic way, not an egoistic way of living life, of course, this would be much more easier. But I think that what you said, to connect together in a real network of outreaching and science communication, is the solution, because in this way we are able to involve people and to make people talking each other, because if
Yes,
we
I
talk
agree.
each others, you can tell me, okay, don't say that things in the I don't know, in geology, because it's not true. Let me tell you that what's the true, because I'm a geologist. While, as you said before, now you see scientists in the TV that they're saying everything. I call those scientists omnivores, because they talk about everything, from embryos to, I don't know, to what.
It never happened in Georgia.
You can imagine. And word expert is not used at all. I mean,
yes, but which is the fallout now, that science is not more credible.
Yeah, that's exactly. I think
That's the problem.
Maybe it's time now to invite Angelo to discussion. And would you mind to present him, please?
Angelo, many 10 years ago, we decided to move into a more, to change the organization of Bergamo Scienza by creating a group of young people working on what we are discussing, exactly what we are discussing. And actually this group was formed, and it increases in numbers and in quality over the time. And now, from this year on, they are in charge of running the program. Of course, they have the scientific committee, which is helping them to exactly filter out what is real or what is not real, but they are the master of organizing everything. And in this year in particular, since they have in their end the way of communicating, they are really and Angelo is part of this group, is one of the most important young people participating, and that's we would like to listen his voice, because his voice is very important for us.
Okay, thank you.
So, Angelo, now you listen to three wise men talking about the science and education. How can you contribute to this discussion and give us your standpoint as a younger generation? What is wrong, what we are saying, and what is right?
Why we are boring?
I know you're not boring at all. I completely agree with all the points. So, of course, we need, as young generations, some sort of guide by the experts. But I think that also, as young people, we can provide some sort of innovations, giving some sort of fresh air to science, because maybe we still have some sort of curiosity. And I think that curiosity is really important, for scientists. So maybe if we try to embrace science and to make also all the young people come close to science, this is really important for the future, again, to provide us some sort of a new point of view. And this is what we are trying to do as the youth committee of Bergamo Scienza, so referring to toddlers, teenagers, as to provide this sort of critical thinking to them, because you see, even what we are experiencing now with the pandemic, if you don't have the tools of this critical thinking that are usually, and unfortunately, as my professor before said, is not provided during high school, you cannot question the world. You see science as some sort of a dogma. You just read facts on the books and that's it. But this is not science. Science is like
you need scientific thinking to develop, and it doesn't come by itself. I mean, that's where training and our experience might contribute. I mean, everyone can read the handbooks and the literature, but then how to use it in which right way?
You know, we listen to like a lot of experts nowadays saying different things. We unfortunately hear a lot of people who are not experts as well, but write a lot of stuff. But you know, you need to like be able to understand like who am I reading, what am I reading, why is he saying that, and like, and then come with a generalized idea. And during this pandemic, of course, we realized how important this is with this all tons of informations we are reading. But so by doing that, we are trying to innovating our.
What is the innovation now?
Yeah, so like
what will be different this year?
We basically realized immediately in February and March that we had to do something, because of course we have the festival which takes place in September and October, but still we came out with the events throughout the entire year. So also for the events in March, we had to come up with some ideas, and so we used basically social networks. We created a challenge to like teach how to wash your hands. We create an event like it's called in English basically Science at Your Ease, so to watch conferences from your place, or also laboratories for toddlers diffused by the social medias. But it was of course really soon that we realized that would affect the entire year, because the pandemic, beginning of epidemic, then became a pandemic, and so we had to reorganize everything. So we came up with this idea of creating a pre-festival. So in order to make people feel at their ease with the technology we'll be using, so to kind of teach them how to use it and prepare them.
So to prepare to make it more accessible and
keeping the standards high,
efficient.
Of course. Yeah. And so we are preparing then the festival for September, keeping the same duality, so referring to adults and young people all together. That's of course, as this is a big challenge to keep them together, because of course there should be a link, and also using an idea of less but better. So of course, with technology, you cannot post like 10 conferences a day.
Anything
you have to keep like them short, but really, really interesting. And of course, using the digital tools, but the same really high and maybe even better quality standards. As you always saying before, we are trying also to use the technology not as a mere substitute. So like something we have to arrange quickly to do, but as a powerful tool for this conference and maybe even for the future. So you were previously saying about more internationalization, so to widen up the public we have, overcoming territorial barriers, but also even other kind of territorial barriers. Maybe we can use technology to show places that before were not accessible to people. Of course, if you are in a conference room, you cannot see, I don't know, maybe a territory, which a lab or something, which of course,
or actual experiments,
exactly.
archaeological sites or whatever.
So well, let's try. No, that's wonderful to be connected with all of this. You know, it's really wonderful.
Yeah.
And I think what we can see today, that you two generations are already working with each other. This is a fantastic example. That science is not just old academics, and this could be. No, that depends on us too. You see, this is not just question of, as Gianvito said, if you will show quality, you will get it. You know, there are not very fair today, if you will see, about attention to the culture, football and science, right? But,
don't touch football in this.
Yeah, but I will touch from other side.
Painful spot for you.
No, but I would say if people will work like are working in football to identify talents in football, will work for science, I don't think this will be less. So let's compete. Let's put, like Angelo put it, let's put high aims. Not to think that somebody will do it for us, right? And this is exactly moment for science, I think, to come out from post-crisis very successful and strong, and people like you and your festival were you have really combination, high level of science and grassroots works. This is exactly, for me personally, this is only way to develop society.
No, I agree, David. The reason why, what Angelo said is exactly the explanation of why those young people should take over us in organizing things and should use us as a way to have solid basis for doing whatever they would like to do.
I think
And unfortunately, as you know, some people, even scientists, they tend to use those kind of festival as a way to show up themselves, possibly when they are not good scientists, frankly speaking. And therefore, they leave little space to others. They, the one-man show. We know many of these people doing this, but while if you are able to involve people and to support really young people, and not just saying we do a lot of things for young people, we do everything for everybody, and that's not true, because those are just empty words. But if you are concrete and if you give them the possibility to work, they are much better than us, no doubt about that, and they are capable of doing everything. You should simply guide them, help them, support them. Of course, economically speaking, it's very important because we are much more capable of raising money, which is a problem because, right? Exactly. And for them would be very, very difficult. But this is
doable. It's doable. And doable. Unless we try, we will never know whether it will work. Exactly. But I think this is the future. And I think with this optimistic note, looking in the future and in the future generation, we would like to thank you, Gianvito, again for joining us. And I'm sure we will have another meetings, and especially if we will decide to join our efforts in the festival. Angelo, thank you very much for being with us. I think you give us very interesting perspective how we should work. And I hope not only us, but many other scientists will take into account what we discussed now and the view of the younger generation, and that's all counts. I mean, we need continuity, and we need to look in forward and to the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Really.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure.
We appreciate
thank you, Dada. Thank you, David, for inviting us. Thank you, Angelo. And I'm sure that at least this year I would like you to promise me that this year Georgian Science Festival and Bergamo Scienza will completely join to work together in order to...
We already started.
Consider it as an initiation of this process.
We already started on
this is the epiphany. Let's put it this way.
Exactly.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Gianvito.
Thank you
very much.
Thank you, Angelo.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Bye.